a screwdriver, a big jacket, and a girlfriend. That is literally all this guy needed to steal $1.9 billion worth of art. No guns, no explosives, no high-tech gadgets, just those three things. And for 6 years straight, nobody on Earth could figure out who was doing it. This is the story of Stefan Breitwieser, the greatest art thief who ever lived. Stefan Breitwieser was born in France in 1971. By all accounts, he was the most ordinary person you could ever meet. He worked as a waiter in a small restaurant. He lived in his mother's attic because he couldn't afford his own place. He had no criminal record, no dangerous friends, no connections to any gang or criminal organization whatsoever. He was just a regular guy who really loved art. Since he was a child, Stefan had an obsession with art. He would spend his weekends visiting museums and galleries across France just to stand and stare at paintings for hours. Not because he was studying them, not because he was planning anything. He just genuinely loved beautiful art more than almost anything else in the world. And that love was about to become the most expensive hobby in human history. In 1994, Stefan met a woman named Anne Catherine Kleinklaus. She was a nurse, calm, intelligent, and apparently completely fine with doing highly illegal things on the weekends. Because when Stefan eventually told her about his plan to steal art from museums, her response was not call the police. Not are you insane? It was simply, okay, sure, let's do it. March 1995. Stefan and Anne Catherine traveled to a small medieval town in Switzerland called Gruyere. Yes, the same name as the cheese. The town had a beautiful castle that had been converted into a museum filled with paintings and artifacts from the Middle Ages. And crucially for Stefan, it had almost zero security, a handful of guards, no cameras, and barely any visitors that day. Inside the castle, Stefan and Anna Catherine walked through the corridors looking at the paintings. And then Stefan stopped. In front of him was a painting by a German artist named Christian Wilhelm Ernst Dietrich. It showed a woman in a dress looking directly out of the canvas. Her eyes locked onto whoever was looking at her, and Stefan felt something he had never felt before. He had to have it. Right now. Today. Now here is where it gets interesting. Stefan had no plan. He had never stolen anything before in his life. But he looked at the painting, looked at the frame, looked at the screws holding it to the wall, and thought, I have a screwdriver in my pocket. That is literally how the greatest art heist career in history began, with a screwdriver in a jacket pocket. Anne Catherine positioned herself at the end of the corridor watching for guards and other visitors. Stefan got to work. Slowly and carefully, he unscrewed the painting from its frame, rolled it up gently, tucked it under his jacket, and then both of them walked calmly out of the castle into the daylight. Not one person saw them. Not one alarm went off. It took less than 3 minutes. That night, Stefan unrolled the painting in his mother's attic and hung it on the wall. And something happened to him in that moment that he would later describe as an overwhelming feeling he had never experienced before. Looking at that painting in his own home felt completely different from looking at it in a museum. It felt like it was finally where it was supposed to be, and that feeling became an addiction. Within weeks, Stefan was back in another museum, then another country. He and Anne Catherine traveled across Europe, visiting small and medium-sized galleries and museums. Stefan had a very specific strategy. He only targeted smaller venues, places with beautiful, valuable art, but not enough visitors or money to afford serious security systems. He was hunting in blind spots. Stefan's entire toolkit consisted of exactly 3 things. First, a flathead screwdriver for removing the paintings from their frames. Second, a can of compressed air spray, which he would use to redirect security cameras away from where he was working. Just a quick blast of air would spin a cheap camera on its mount and buy him time. Third, his oversized jacket, which could hide a folded canvas painting against his body completely invisibly. Now here is the part that makes this story truly insane. Stefan never sold a single painting, not one. Every painting he stole he brought home and hung on the walls of his mother's attic, the same tiny attic where he and Anne Catherine lived because they couldn't afford their own apartment. Eventually, every single wall, every ceiling corner, every available surface was covered floor to ceiling with stolen masterpieces worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why did he never sell any of them? Because selling was never the point. Stefan genuinely loved these paintings. He stole them because he wanted to own them, to live with them, to wake up every morning and see them. He wasn't trying to get rich. He was trying to build the most beautiful private art collection in the world, in his mother's attic, while working as a waiter. There was actually genuine genius in Stefan's approach. Most art thieves get caught because they try to sell what they steal. The moment stolen art enters the black market, police can trace it. Stefan removed himself from that equation entirely by simply never selling anything. He also targeted venues so small that many of them didn't even realize they had been robbed for days or weeks after it happened. For 2 years, everything went perfectly. Then in 1997, Stefan made his first mistake. He was at a museum in Lucerne, Switzerland, when a guard noticed something strange about the way Stefan's jacket was hanging. The guard walked around the museum and realized a painting was missing from the wall. He ran outside and blocked Stefan's car before he could drive away. Stefan was arrested on the spot. In court, Stefan put on the performance of his life. He cried. He shook his head in shame. He told the judge this was the first time he had ever done anything like this in his life, that it was just a spontaneous impulse he couldn't explain, that he was deeply ashamed. He had no criminal record, the painting wasn't particularly valuable, and his acting was apparently Oscar-worthy because the judge believed every single word. The judge gave Stefan 8 months probation and banned him from entering Switzerland. That's it. 8 months probation for stealing art from a museum. Stefan walked out of that courtroom and within weeks was back stealing paintings in every other European country. Switzerland was temporarily off the list. Everywhere else was completely fair game. Over the next 4 years, Stefan's confidence reached almost delusional levels. He would steal from a museum and then come back to the same museum the next day in a slight disguise, a fake mustache, different clothes, and steal again from the same museum that he had just robbed yesterday. Multiple times he hit the same venue 3 or 4 times before moving on. The audacity of this man was genuinely staggering. By the time it was all over, Stefan Breitwieser had committed approximately 240 art thefts across 172 museums and galleries in 7 different European countries over a period of nearly 7 years. The total estimated value of everything he stole, according to the New York Times, was approximately $1.9 billion. One man, a screwdriver, a jacket, $1.9 billion. By 2001, Stefan decided enough time had passed and returned to Switzerland. His probation was long over. He went back to Lucerne, the same city where he had been caught 4 years earlier, and targeted a different museum. He stole an antique bugle from a display case, walked out clean, 0 problems. And then, because he apparently had absolutely no sense of self-preservation whatsoever, he came back 2 days later to steal again. A guard recognized his face from 2 days ago. He quietly radioed his colleagues. As Stefan was removing a painting from its frame, the guards surrounded him from every direction simultaneously. Stefan turned around and found himself completely encircled. There was nowhere to go. He was caught with a stolen painting literally in his hands. This time, the acting wasn't going to work. From across town, Catherine watched Stefan get arrested and immediately called his mother. She told her to get rid of everything in the attic, every painting, every artifact, everything, right now. No time to explain. The mother, who had no idea what any of it was worth, went upstairs and started destroying one of the greatest private art collections ever assembled. Stefan's mother burned some of the paintings in the fireplace. When the fireplace was full, she carried the rest of them to the local canal and threw them in. The canal was shallow. The current was slow. Within days, locals noticed paintings floating in the water. Authorities recovered what they could, but most of it was completely destroyed by fire and water damage. $1.9 billion in art, gone forever. Meanwhile, police searched Stefan's attic and found nothing. They were confused. A detective had a hunch that the paintings found in the canal might be connected to Stefan. So he went to Stefan's cell and told him they had found his secret stash. Stefan didn't know his mother had destroyed everything. He assumed they meant the attic, so he immediately confessed to everything, every single theft, 240 of them. After confessing to 240 thefts worth nearly $2 billion, Stefan was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 3 years for nearly $2 billion in stolen art. He ended up serving only 2 years. Catherine got 6 months. His mother got 18 months because she was the one who actually destroyed the irreplaceable artwork. In some ways, she got the harshest sentence for trying to help her son. Before Stefan was released from prison, Catherine left him. She sent a message saying she would not be waiting and had no intention of continuing any kind of relationship with him. His mother never contacted him either. Stefan had chosen art over everything, and in the end, art was all he had left. He was released from prison broke, alone, and with no prospects whatsoever. After his release, Stefan tried to rebuild his life by writing a memoir about his crimes. He called it Confessions of an Art Thief. He thought people would find his story fascinating and the book would sell well enough to live on. The book sold almost nothing. It was a commercial failure. Stefan was broke, alone, and out of options, and so he made a decision that surprised absolutely no one who had been paying attention. Stefan started stealing art again, but this time was different. This time he actually tried to sell the pieces, and exactly as predictable as the sun rising in the east, the moment stolen art enters the black market, police can trace it. In 2011, Stefan was caught trying to sell a stolen painting. Police searched his new apartment and found over 30 more stolen works. He was arrested again, sentenced again. 3 more years. After serving his second sentence, Stefan was placed under surveillance. Police watched him. And in 2019, 18 years after his first major arrest, Stefan was caught again, this time trying to sell stolen antiquities on eBay. On eBay, the man who had once orchestrated the greatest art theft in human history was caught selling stolen goods on the same website where people sell used furniture. Police also found hundreds of thousands of dollars hidden at his mother's house. Stefan Breitwieser's current whereabouts are unknown. After his 2019 arrest, there have been no further reports about him, whether he is still in prison, out on parole, or somewhere in Europe looking at paintings in museums with that familiar look in his eyes. Nobody knows for certain. What we do know is this: one man, a screwdriver, a jacket, a girlfriend who said yes, $1.9 billion, the greatest art thief who ever lived, and he did it all because he just really, really loved art. And that is the story of Stefan Breitwieser. Honestly, I still can't fully process this story even after researching it for weeks. The man stole $1.9 billion worth of art, never sold a single piece, lost everything, and then tried to sell stuff on eBay. I genuinely don't know whether to be impressed or baffled. Tell me what you think in the comments right now. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe because there are so many more stories like this one waiting for you.